Hey everyone, today we're going to learn how to go beyond just the standard animations that you find inside of Articulate Storyline and do something like this where you hover over, you can see that animations will come in, things will pop up and kind of bounce a little bit as well. And then as I start to hover over it, things will go in and out. So that's just a small snippet of what we're going to learn today. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome back. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out my website at learningdojo.ninja. Here you can check out all previous blog posts with previous tips and tricks on Camtasia, Articulate Storyline, Adobe Captivate, Rise 360, and more. You can also check out templates for both Articulate Storyline 360 and XAPI templates as well. And if you're brand new to Articulate Storyline or any of these other tools, you can also check out full courses on Articulate Storyline 360, where you learn everything from A to Z, Adobe Captivate, XAPI fundamentals, Articulate Rise, Custom SCORM, and HTML5 video. Now, when you're working with Storyline, the animations are pretty basic right inside of Storyline. If I come into Storyline and I select an object, and then I go into my animations tab, I can select an entrance animation or I can select an exit animation. When I select this drop down box, you can see that I can do things like fade in, fly in, float in, other things like that. If I go ahead and select one of those items, I can add on direction. So if I wanted to fade in from the left, fade in from the right, and so forth. Now you can also, with the motion pass, you can have it move from point A to point B, and you can get pretty complex with some of those motion paths. But what if you wanted to add on some easing or some snapping like we saw in the example, where it pops up and it just kind of bounces in place, and then as soon as it goes out, it bounces out. Or if you wanted to add complex animations with different features and easings and other things like that, you can actually do that inside of Articulate Storyline 360, but it does take some custom code to do. But I'm going to walk you through that code, and most of the code that you'll need is going to be found below the video, so go ahead and check that out. Now, the code library that's included when you publish out inside of Articulate Storyline is called Greensock. Now, Greensock has a lot of different code libraries. They have other things like smooth scroll trigger, they have scroll smoother, draggable as well. Now, those ones are not included. You will need to actually purchase a license for Greensock to be able to do that. But for the regular gsap, as they call it, animations, all of that is included. Now, to get us started, you can go into the docs section right here on Greensock, and then you can go to getting started right here. Now, this will give you a good start to finish example. Now, it doesn't specifically tie this to Storyline. This is mostly talking about just web development. But since Storyline publishes to web and all of the content is essentially a website, we can go ahead and include this. Now, this library is also already included when you export out from Storyline. So as I start to scroll here, you'll notice this is the code that it takes in order to animate something. So as simple as just animating it from left to right or top to bottom takes something like this. In order for you to understand this though, you need to understand that when you're looking at your storyline stage, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a storyline stage here. Coming from side to side, that is the X value. It starts at 0 over on the left-hand side, and then it ends to whatever size you've actually created your storyline slide as. The top from bottom is the Y value. So it actually starts out as 0 up on the top, and then to go down is just whatever size you've actually created for the height inside of your storyline size here. So that's important to know because when we're animating, if I go back into Greensock, if we're animating, we are animating the X and the Y value. Now we can animate other things like the scale and rotation and other things like that, but it's important to know that if you're going to animate on the stage somewhere, you're going to use that X and Y value. Now this is as simplistic as the code will get, and you can get that code also below the video as well. So let's go ahead and let's apply this to Storyline. Inside of this code, you can see that it's targeting something called a box. Now that box is a class inside of HTML. That's just a way to identify an object inside of HTML. Well, we can't really do that with Storyline. We need to be able to identify the object a little bit differently. The way that we do that is inside of storyline, we right click, and to give an object a unique name that we can identify in code, we have to give it an accessibility name. So right here, I gave it alternative text of basketball. And because I did that, I can search for the item basketball that's going to be unique from any other square or any other object on the stage. And so that's important to know here. So this is how I'm going to identify it. So what I'm going to do is have this Start Animations button trigger a custom JavaScript. So select the drop-down box for the action, and we're going to go down to Execute JavaScript. I need to be able to talk to that storyline object. So inside of the JavaScript, the first line of code that I'm going to add is we're going to create a variable. And the proper way now is to actually use let instead of var. But we're going to create a variable and we're going to call it the object. I'd probably want to call it basketball or something like that. But right now, that is how you talk to that object. Now, in my code coming up here, I don't have to type in this complete, like this long line of code. I can just say the object when I'm talking to this basketball here. So you can see what it does is it's talking to the stage, so whatever the browser is, and then it's saying, hey, select everything that is with the account or this accessibility text of basketball. So anything that has that accessibility text of basketball, go ahead, and anytime I'm talking about the object, go ahead and affect that basically. That is what that line of code is doing. Again, you can just copy and paste it. The only thing you would need to change is if you don't use the term basketball inside of the accessibility here, you would just need to change inside of those quotes, you would need to change whatever it is. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and copy this right here, this line of code, and then I'm going to paste that inside of my storyline trigger. Now you can stretch out the JavaScript editor as you want, but the only thing we need to change here is instead of that box inside of quotes, we're going to be talking about the object. So we're going to move the object, and then inside of these curly brackets is where we define the properties of how that object is going to be moved. So the first and only value that we have is X. It's going to move to 200. Well, if I click OK here, and then I click OK, if I select that object, notice that the X value is about 733. So what it's going to do is just kind of move it all the way. And if I move this, move it all the way to about 200. Now it usually starts out right on the top left-hand side of where that's going to animate. So keep that in mind. Now inside of Storyline, I cannot see this if I just publish in Storyline. To see anything that's JavaScript, I need to publish it out and view it from there. So you may have to get used to that where you just come into the Home tab, you click on Publish, and then you go ahead and hit Publish from there. And you can just publish to the web. You don't need to publish to the LMS. It'll still work inside of an LMS because it's basically a website in the LMS that's running there. But I don't need to zip it up. I can just go ahead and double click on story.html. And then I can go to that Greensock animations page that I have here, and then go ahead and click on Start Animation. Now, even though I already have this set up, you can go ahead and create any type of storyline project, create a circle, create a button, and just name that circle the basketball. So I'm going to click on Start Animation, and you can see that it's moved over. So I'm actually thinking that the object itself is actually middle inside of the shape here. So that's why it's moved it over to about middle instead of kind of right over the rectangle or the square there. That's how you trigger the animation. Now that's just scratching the surface. There is so much more that you can do with these different animations. So let's go back into the Greensock animation here, and let's start to scroll down to see everything that you can do. So you can have, instead of a to, you can have a from. You want to animate it from, let's say off the stage, like 2000 pixels or something like that. Or from and to, if you're defining both. But you can see here how it's selecting the different objects and it's starting to animate. Well, I'm going to go in here and see that I can also adjust the rotation. So we can't really see the rotation with the circle. So let's go ahead and just copy this. I'm going to copy this right here. And we're going to change the accessibility to, from the circle, I'm going to go ahead and right click and remove that basketball. So I'm going to cut it using Command X or Control X. And then I'm going to right click on this accessibility, and we're going to go ahead and say basketball there and hit close. That way we can see the rotation. Because it's a circle, we won't be able to actually see the rotation. It will be rotating. We just won't be able to see it. So let's go back in here And let's grab that rotation right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to adjust two different things inside of this execute JavaScript. Instead of X, we're actually going to do Y. And so let's go ahead and say Y, and then we're going to do 400 right here. Now to add on other properties, meaning that you want to animate both the X and the Y or rotation or duration or other things like that, all you do is inside of these curly brackets is add a comma, and then you can add on additional properties. Now you just define the property like this, rotation, colon, and then whatever the value is that you want to change in that property. So we're going to go ahead and rotate it 360 degrees as it starts to animate. You can change that to whatever you want, but 360 is going to make that full circle rotation. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and then we will publish this out and see what it looks like. Okay, so I don't need to zip it up. Let's go ahead and double click on this again. And let's go into Greensock animations, and it should now be animating this. And so if I click on start animation, oh, one thing, if you double click on it and you didn't close it before, you will need to either close it completely or you will need to clear your cache. Now I'm on Safari, so I go to develop and then I go to empty caches here. So now I need to double click on that to launch it again. I'm going to click on restart just so it gets a refresh here. Click on Greensock animations and then click on start animations. So you notice how it did not only the Y value, it moved it down, but it also rotated it as well, a full 360 degrees. Now, if I want to slow this down a little bit, I can add on other things, like I can add on duration. I'm going to add on another value here. So let's go into execute JavaScript, and you can start to build with this and you can start to play with it, add on things and see exactly what you like here. So let's go ahead and say duration is going to be 2 seconds, but just so I don't have to publish it out again, let's have this scale as well. Now, scale you need to play close attention to, because if I just do scale 2, it's going to actually do it by 200%. And if I do 1, it's just going to keep it as normal. What I would probably need to do if I just want a slight like adjustment is I would probably need to do 1 point like maybe 0.2 or something like that. So 1.02 to have it as just a slight one. Or let's go ahead and do 1.2. I want it a little bit more, but let's go ahead and do that and click OK. So let's publish this out again. All right, so we did not close this out, so I'm going to close that out. I'll clear my cache again, so develop and then empty caches. And then I will double click on story.html, go into Greensock animations, and let's hit start animation. So you see that it takes 2 seconds, it increases the size, the scale, and it automatically happens like that. So that, I mean, as you start to play with this, you can do a lot of different things. You probably wouldn't want to do just movements like that, but you could have something like this where you have things bounce up. Now, to get that bounce effect, that is something called easing. So if I go into Greensock and I start to scroll down here, you can see that there is X value rotation, Y percent if you're working with different percentages as well. So you can see all the different values that you can add. Now, I tried playing around with the background, but because it's a storyline object, I think it does the background color a little bit differently. So I wasn't able to change that. Just keep that in mind. But if I come down here, let's go down to one of my favorite things is the easing right here. So you notice we have ease by default, it's going to be ease none, but we also have an ease bounce out here. So you can see the bounce out, how that affects, it kind of bounces back and so forth. So let's copy that, go into our storyline course here, and I'm going to go ahead and add on a comma, and then we're going to add on an ease bounce out. Click OK. And let's go ahead and hit publish. Now you may be wondering, why out? Why does it say dot out, bounce dot out? Or it could say bounce dot in. It could also say bounce dot in out. Why that? Why? What does that mean? Well, in is actually if you want it to, that bounce effect to take more effect on the start of the animation. Out is if you want that bounce effect to take more of effect on the end of that animation, or in and out, the bounce effect will take place on both the start and the end of the animation. So that's what that means. If you want the bounce to be at the very start, then do just in. If you want the bounce to be at the very end and only the end of the animation, do just out. If you want it to be on both, then do in and out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit publish here. So let's now close out our project, clear our caches, and then hit story.html. Now, I would probably just close this out in the future, delete the project files. That would also do it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Greensock animation, hit start animation, and you'll notice we now get that bounce effect, which is pretty cool. I mean, we have this, we can start adding on these different types of easings and get a lot more control with our animations than we can with Storyline. Now, you probably would not want to do this when you're animating to the timeline because you can't really do this kind of thing easily on the timeline unless you're adding JavaScript triggers along the timeline. So that's possible. However, this would be more something like this type of example where the learner is hovering over things and animation is happening once it hovers over. So I'm going to go back into here and let's do one more thing here. If I go into Greensock, let's close this out. And like I mentioned, if you don't want to have to clear your cache every time, just close the browser and delete the folder there. Now, if I scroll down here, this gives me an idea of all the different easings that I can do. If I click on one of them, you can see how, watch this little ball as it starts to animate up, you can see what that looks like. And then you can also change in or out. So if I want to do in, you can see how the animation starts really slow and then gets really fast. If I change this to both in and out, you can see the slowing is at the very beginning and at the very end. And if I change this to just out, you can see that the slowing is at the very end. Same thing with things like Elastic. Elastic will go beyond the endpoint and kind of bounce back. Bounce itself doesn't go beyond that endpoint. It just goes to that endpoint and bounces. Almost like a basketball, if it drops to the ground and it doesn't go beyond the ground, it just kind of bounces off the ground there. And then all you would have to do here is just copy that code, and then you would just paste it inside of Storyline. And then same thing with the duration, if you wanted to adjust the duration and so forth. So many different possibilities here. I'm going to be exploring this a lot through my different videos. We're going to be talking about enhancing some of our interactions. So make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. You come back and check out these different videos as well. I want to just call out a couple things of how I did this animation. You can see that I did on hover. I executed this JavaScript and I'm talking to both the object itself here, and I'm also talking to this image up here. So I'm using that same line of code to talk to two different objects at once. And then what I'm doing is I'm animating the object scale here. And then I'm also animating the image, and the image is just the Y, and the actual object here is the object that will bounce in here. This one is just using a circ one, so it starts to slow down as it comes out. So a lot of different possibilities here. Again, make sure that you like and subscribe and you check out all of my different YouTube videos. You can check out on my website under blog posts, all of my previous videos. You can see the templates, all my different game templates inside of Articulate Storyline. You can see my XAPI templates as well. You can also check out full courses, everything you need to know from A to Z on Articulate Storyline, Adobe Captivate, XAPI Fundamentals, Articulate Rise Custom SCORM, and HTML5 video. Well, that's all I have for today, so I will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.